All right, so let's talk about rules of thumb. Rules of thumb are going to govern so much of what we do in this owner financing world because we just don't have it quite as easy as the cash buyer would. Not to say that we aren't cash buyers as well, because you absolutely should be, but when you're analyzing a deal that is up for owner financing, we fall under some different rules. We can't just say, oh, I buy at 75 cents minus repairs, or oh, I buy 70 cents minus repairs. It doesn't make sense anymore. So we have to be able to look at a deal that might require us to buy it 100 cents on the dollar, might require us to buy it 95 cents on the dollar. But we've got to have our own way of looking at that deal, our own way of understanding whether or not that is worth us doing the deal on. So before I get any further into it, I want to pose this question for you. Why is it that we say that we have to buy at 75 cents when we're buying with cash? Why is it that we say that we have to buy at 70 cents? What are these discounts really representing? And the answer that I want to point out to you guys is that it's all about risk. Every percentage that you see in this industry is about risk. Risk is the reason why I might get one interest rate on a loan and you might get another interest rate on a loan. That's a percentage reflecting risk. Same thing goes for our cash purchases. Our cash purchases, we get the luxury of having to, or falling on years and years and years of other investors who have gone out and paved the way and figured out what does and does not make a deal. And so we found out that with 70% purchases, ideally, and 75-cent purchases in those strong markets, and sometimes people are even going to 82. Sometimes you look at hedge funds, they're going to 90. What we found is that if you buy at this percentage, you should, worst case scenario, break even. That's the point of that percentage. The point of that percentage is if things go wrong, if you buy at this percentage, ideally, hypothetically speaking, the worst thing that happens is you break even. That's why we have that there. So my question to you is, if we don't have money to risk, why do we need that discount? In other words, when you're doing a cash purchase, you've got to protect the capital that's changing hands. It might not be your cash, it might be a private money lender's cash, but it's still cash that's going from your pocket into somebody else's pocket, or somebody else's pocket into the seller's pocket. You have $100,000 on the line, $150,000 on the line. There's actual cash there. When you're doing a subject to deal, you might not have cash on the line, so what are you risking? Why do you have to protect something at that point in time? So you think of things kind of similarly to how a wholesaler would think of it. Wholesalers are not so concerned because what they're risking is the time that they put into getting that contract done. That's what they're risking, right? So similarly, if you don't have any cash in the deal on a sub-2 deal, let's say that somebody approaches you, they're current on payments, they just know that they're not going to be able to afford moving forward. And I've had this happen before. I had a school teacher, for example, that was based out of Dallas. They moved down pretty far south in Texas. They got another job and they were holding 2 mortgages and they couldn't sustain that anymore. They responded to some of my marketing. They said, "Look, Grant, I can't sustain both payments. Please just take this off of my hands." So I did. 0 cash out. I had a little bit of equity in the deal. It was worth doing. But what made me decide that that little bit of equity was worth it? Well, there was no cash out, right? So that's where we hit our rules of thumb. We need to hit a couple of rules of thumb. And again, I'm calling these rules of thumb because that's what they are. They're rules of thumb. They're not laws. This is not something that you have to abide by. This is purely something that when I looked at my portfolio and I said, what is it really that makes me decide whether or not I'm going to do a deal? I sat down because I needed to systematize this to give you guys something. And this was years ago, and I struggled with it and I wrestled with it, and these were the results that we came with. So first rule of thumb is that I want you to have 2 times cash, okay? The second rule of thumb is that if that is unreasonable, I want you to get at least, or I say at least, around 82% with a total basis. And my third rule of thumb is that you should have a minimum cash flow requirement in your head. My minimum cash flow requirement is $150 per door, okay? So that's the intro to what these rules of thumb are. Now, I'm gonna do a separate video for each one of these rules of thumb so that if you wanna kind of rewatch that specific one, you'll be able to. But again, those are the 3. So keep tuned in. We've got our 2 times cash, we've got the 82% basis, and we've got our minimum cash flow. All right, stay tuned, watch each one of those to learn how you're going to properly analyze an owner finance deal that doesn't fall into the same buckets as like a cash deal would. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video.